Welcome everybody, I'm Kaioken, and in this video we're going to be doing something very different to what we usually do here on this channel. But it is a style of content that I've alluded to my desire to explore for a while now, which, by the way, I am also still working on Kaldor Drago vs Meruem and Sukuna of Warhammer 40k and Jujutsu Kaisen respectively. However, I think it's only fair to wait for the current arc of JJK to wrap up in the manga before continuing on with that script. That being said, this is another hypothetical that I believe to be very interesting, using characters from two verses that I absolutely adore, with one being the pinnacle of alien hunting special forces, and the other being a species of mutant apex predators hailing from a forbidden continent. That being said, I asked the question, could Captain Artemis' watch company Tertius be capable of taking down Meruem and the NGL Chimera and Uprising? Let's start off with the Astartes, shall we? For those unaware, Astartes, also known as Space Marines, are genetically enhanced super soldiers of the Warhammer 40,000 universe. These towering warriors clad in massive power armour embody the might of the Imperium of Man. Forged through rigorous training and gene manipulation, they serve the immortal God Emperor, battling Xenos, heretics and demons with unmatched skill and fervour. Each Astartes is a living weapon, wielding devastating weaponry and possessing unyielding loyalty to their chapter and cause, often for hundreds, and in special cases even thousands of years, as only in death does duty end. Astartes' biology is fundamentally altered during their transformation into superhuman warriors. Through the implantation of gene seed organs derived from the genetic material of the Primarchs, they gain enhanced physical attributes, including, but not limited to, increased strength, speed and endurance. These gene seed organs include the catalepsian node, which allows the Astartes to consciously switch off sections of the brain sequentially, while remaining awake and alert, much like bottlenose dolphins in real life. Others include the os medulla, which fortifies their bones and musculature, the biscopea, which stimulates rapid muscle growth by pumping them with more testosterone and growth hormones than a love child of Vitor Belfort and Uberim, as well as the Laramans organ, a biosynthetic organ which allows a Marine's wounds to instantly clot and heal, with scar tissue forming in a matter of seconds. Furthermore, their cardiovascular and respiratory systems are enhanced to support their increased physical demands, allowing them to endure extreme environments and prolonged combat engagements. The melanochrome organ regulates their skin pigmentation for camouflage, while the Susan membrane allows them to enter a state of suspended animation to survive grievous injuries that even an Astartes wouldn't normally be able to survive. Coupled with their rigorous training and indoctrination, Astartes' biology molds them into near-perfect warriors, second only to the Adeptus Custodes and the Primarchs, capable of withstanding wounds that would kill ordinary humans and deliver devastating force upon their enemies in the meantime. This biological superiority, combined with their iconic power armour and centuries of combat experience, make the Adeptus Astartes the most formidable soldiers in the Imperium of Man's arsenal. Now, the Deathwatch are the chamber militant of the Ordo Xenos, and it consists of veteran Astartes drawn from various chapters to combat alien threats across the galaxy. Clad in black power armour adorned with the Inquisition's signals, they specialise in hunting down Xenos species with precision and ruthlessness. Their mission takes them to the darkest corners of the galaxy, where they stand as bulwarks against the encroaching tide of extraterrestrial adversaries. Now that that's out of the way, to deal with the Chimera portion of this video, I've brought along my good friend Sokol, and with that, take it away.
Thank you for having me on Six Pass. Hello everyone, I'm Sokol from the channel Sokol, and I'm your resident nerd. Today we're going to be talking about the Chimera ants and just how fearsome these insects actually are. In the Hunter x Hunter series, the Chimera ants are a species of insects from the Dark Continent and are canonically labeled as Quarantine Level 1, which basically means stay the fuck away from them, and they aren't labeled as this for no reason. See, the Chimera species have the unique ability that any organism they consume, the next generation will have the best features of that organism, making them stronger than the previous generation. Eventually, this species made it near enough to human civilization where they began eating humans, and from there, that's when shit hit the fan. Further down the line, they started focusing their diet away from regular humans, but to that of humans with a high concentration of Nen, giving way to the next generation of ants that eclipsed that of about 99% of the human population in terms of power. The queen ant, however, had one job only, giving birth to the rightful king of the Chimera ants, a being who would rule the world with his sheer might alone. But first she needed to give birth to 3 fully subservient ants that would obey and protect the king at any cost, even if it be that of their own life. Thus, with some sugar, spice, and everything nice, the royal guards were born. Pito, Yuppie, and Poof were not only menacing to the entire population of humanity, but also the entire current population of the Chimera ants themselves. Netero, being the strongest human at the time, was said that he was weaker than the royal guards before he began storing Nen for his ultimate fight. Poof, the seemingly weakest royal guard, possesses potent abilities including molecular manipulation, rendering him impervious to most direct physical attacks. However, he is susceptible to AoE attacks like Killua's lightning. His true strength, however, lies in his cunning and adeptly manipulating opponents such as Mortal. Poof also wields spiritual message, using his scales to glean insights into thoughts and emotions with a notable hypnotic effect demonstrated on a crowd outside the palace. Yuppie, the next of the royal guards, is the opposite of Poof, as he is more dull in his intelligence, but what he lacks in brains, he makes up twofold with brawn. Known as the Shield of the King, he can effortlessly tear off enhanced human limbs and devastate structures with his strikes alone. His Nen capacity is vast, demonstrated by his resilience against Knuckles' APR, which was rendered completely useless. With the power of metamorphosis, he can reshape his body at will, manifesting tentacles, wings, or even repairing damage. Additionally, he can unleash a powerful rage-fueled blast capable of cratering the ground. Yuppie's durability is unmatched, with even Godspeed Killua unable to harm him significantly, though lacking the speed to counter Killua effectively. Pito, the most intriguing of the royal guards, possesses cat-like traits that complement their abilities. Enhanced senses, speed, reflexes, and intuition make Pito formidable in combat. And when in a protective mode for protecting the king, Pito is adept enough to be able to hear Netero speaking and even perceive his normally imperceptible movements. Specializing in Nen, Pito's N has an impressive range of 2 kilometers, far surpassing even the strongest humans with a maximum 50-meter range. Pito's intelligence and rapid Nen mastery are matched by their strength, effortlessly defeating powerful foes like Kite. Pito has the puppeteering ability, able to puppeteer just about anyone able to be set. These puppets can be very numerous, exceeding that of 50. However, the more there are, the less specific control Pito has, making them less efficient. Pito can also puppeteer Dr. Blythe, which can heal even the most serious injuries, but this process does take time. And Pito's most powerful ability is called Puppet Master's Serenity. With this, Pito puppeteers their own body, allowing them to forcefully far exceed any previous limits once had. In this form, Pito may arguably be the strongest of the royal guards. What makes this ability all the more deadly is that when a Nen user dies, their Nen becomes much stronger after death, allowing for Pito to continue fighting even after death due to being puppeteered, and with even more ferocity than when they were previously alive. But of course, the royal guards, while impressive, are not the star of the show. Eventually, the king, Meruem, was born. Straight out the womb, Meruem far exceeded that of the royal guards in just about every way, shape, and form. If he willed it, he could have killed any of the royal guards, hell, even all 3 of the royal guards at any moment he desired. It was quickly found that Meruem's inherent ability was that anyone whom he consumed, their power was immediately added to his own. Now see, Meruem is a fucking badass. He is by far one of the most intelligent characters within the show, able to pick up a rulebook for a strategy game and within a few hours beat the world champions at that strategy game. This strategic ability was what allowed him to not only face off against the world's strongest human, Netero, but also win. Using this scene, we can deduce how fast Meruem is. Taking into account their location as well as the time frame of the battle, we can calculate that the speed Meruem needed to move at was about 1,700 meters per second, or Mach 4.86. Rearranging some values, we can see that his acceleration is over 55,000 meters per second squared. Meruem also had insane durability because after defeating Netero decided to, well, kill himself and turn into a bomb. Meruem practically took this explosion to the face and he survived. Taking into account the blast radius of the explosion as well as the distance Meruem was from Netero, we can calculate his durability to be that of 3.875 times 10 to the 13 joules or 9 kilotons of TNT. While Meruem did survive, he was quickly dying, so his royal guards, Poof and Yuppie, did the only thing they could do and fed as much of themselves as they could to him. By consuming his guards, their enormous power now added to that of Meruem's already godly power, giving birth to the new and improved Rose Meruem. Rose Meruem eclipsed everything he could previously do. He's faster, stronger, and has way more abilities. The strongest thing we see Rose Meruem do is destroy a plateau with Yuppie's Rage Blast ability. Scaling the volume of the plateau to the blast and taking into account the ultimate compressive strength of granite, we can calculate this feat to be 4.85 times 10 to the 14 joules or 116 kilotons of TNT. Since he was able to do this without damaging himself, this value also falls within his durability range. He also gained Yuppie's metamorphosis ability, allowing Meruem to change the shape of his body, give himself wings, and just about everything else Yuppie could do. He also gained the ability to use photons as his N, which literally shoots in all directions at the speed of light. And thanks to Poof, each photon could sense the emotion and thoughts of anyone who touches it. Furthermore, depending on your interpretation of the anime or manga, he was able to almost move instantly to the location of intruders after the photons had landed, making him massively hypersonic, or if you really want to wank him, Meruem may even be relativistic to the speed of light or the speed of light. That concludes my Hunter x Hunter section. I tried to paraphrase as much as I could while still making it understandable, and I hope you've come out realizing how powerful the king of the Chimera ants, Meruem, actually is. Now back to you, Six Paths.
Thanks, brother. Make sure you guys go subscribe to him. As you can see, he really deserves a much larger following. Now that we have a ballpark of how strong Meruem and the Royal Guard are, let's move on to Artemis and the Deathwatch. An important part of this matchup comes in the raw strength of a baseline Astartes, and due to Artemis having only ever appeared on the tabletop and in novels, scaling his physicality becomes a bit tricky. As far as I've been able to find, his height is never explicitly stated in any of the novels or rulebooks he's mentioned in, so we must broadly assume he is of average build for an Astartes, and of course the rest of his company. For the sake of simplicity, there'll just be no-name Deathwatch Marines, with more on that later. I'd like to introduce you all to what I've affectionately dubbed the Shack Scale. Now you may be wondering what the fuck the Great One, the Shaq Fu, Big Diesel himself has to do with the Astartes. Well, it just so happens that Astartes are stated to have an average height of a little over 7 feet tall, and weigh anywhere between 300 to 400 pounds out of their armour. Now, do you want to have a guess how tall Shaquille O'Neal is? That's right, 7'1", or 2.16 metres. And have a little guess at how much he weighs. You got it, Chief. Gold star for you. Using that information, and Shaq's freak athleticism, we can almost use him as a baseline for an Astartes. However, due to the sheer level of genetic modification that an Astartes undergoes and the fact that Shaq was notorious for having never been busted for PEDs, or performance-enhancing drugs, we can gather a really, really low-ball estimation for an Astartes' physical stat line, without assistance from their armour, and use feats from the books and games to find their peak. However, remember that Vitor Belfort and Alistair Overeem joke I made earlier? It actually becomes relevant now. In order for the baseline low ball to become more accurate, let's apply a TRT and anabolic steroid stat boost to Shaq. Using the data from this study, by the NCBI, we can ascertain that anabolic steroids provide the average healthy person with a 52% increase to their strength. Shaq's heaviest bench press ever has been claimed to have been 475 pounds, which 52% of is 247. Adding those numbers together gives us a total of 722 pound bench press, or 327.49 kg. To provide frame of reference, Eddie Hall, literally arguably the strongest man in the world, is only able to bench press 661 pounds, which he successfully managed for a single rep whilst using supporting equipment, meaning that this hypothetical low-ball Astartes is pulling 9.32% more iron than the strongest man alive, whom would also be infinitely inferior in terms of athleticism and stamina. No offense, Eddie, if you're watching this, don't snap me in half. Given the near limitless stamina of an Astartes when compared to a baseline human, this is already absurd. This gets even more ridiculous when you realise that Eddie's heaviest lift that was unassisted is 606 pounds, meaning his equipment provides a 9.23% increase to his lift. Applying that number to the Astartes hypothetical lowball gives us a 66.7 pound increase, taking it up to a whopping 788.7 pound bench, out of his armour. As for Astartes' feats to find the absolute extreme, and of course, these guys aren't going to be outside of their armour during this battle, let's look over the most extreme example. Given that Artemis is originally of the Mortificators chapter, whose gene seed lineage descends from that of the Ultramarines, we need only look to Marneus Calgar, and the infamous Necron pylon incident during Warzone Damnos. Now I know what 40k and TTS fans are thinking, and no, this feat has been majorly blown out of proportion by memes, and TTS specifically. He did not pick it up and swing it around like a club. That would be ridiculous, even for an Astartes. He did, however, push the thing on its axis after melter bombs had rendered the gravitational bearings inoperable. Using the miniatures, with the standard infantry mini being 28mm tall and the pylon being 290, we can ascertain that the pylon is 10.35 times taller than an Astartes, making it roughly 21.6 metres tall. Now Necron warriors, as pictured beside the pylon in this mini, are assumed to be approximately 7 feet tall or just over 213 centimetres, much like an Astartes, and so have a volume of roughly 108 litres. Now obviously the composition and mass of Necrons is never explicitly stated, but if we assume that Necrodermis, the core flux, central reactors, etc. all have an average mass akin to that of steel, which is 7.9 grams per centimetre squared, or 7.9 grams per milliliter, 1000 millilitres to a litre and 1000 grams to a kilogram. Using this formula, we discover that the pylon that Calgar pushed with great effort whilst in his armour weighed approximately 89,172 tonnes, which would require 3.73 times 10 to the 14 joules of force, or roughly 8.89 kilotons of TNT to do so, which places the Astartes somewhere between the ranges of large city and mountain level ranges. As Sokol already mentioned, this would have to equate to their durability, so as to not rip themselves apart. However, in this instance, that statistic is applied to their armour and the powered servos rather than the actual biological forms themselves. As for speed, in a few different sources, Astartes seen going at full speed in combat are said to be barely traceable by the human eye, and that the blur of their movement is seen before it's heard. This means that an Astartes running at absolute full speed must be moving at bare minimum Mach 1, or 343 meters a second, for they'd have to be breaking the sound barrier in order to do so. So we'll just take that speed at face value for combat speed. However, Astartes have been shown in various novels to have reacted to and dodged lasgun fire. For those unaware, lasguns operate by firing a superheated beam of light that burns its way through a target on contact. Thus, it can be argued that a Space Marine is capable of reacting to things travelling at the speed of light. Although, it must be noted that enough lasguns can, and often do, bring down Space Marines. So don't take this section as, oh, well, Artemis can just matrix all through any attacks and 40k's just pumped to 15, blah! Because it's simply not the case. Or only an Astartes would be able to kill another Astartes. And whilst I believe this statement has been made in one of the Horus Heresy novels, we simply know it's not the case. Now that we have the physical stats out of the way, let's go over the equipment of the Astartes. The bolt gun, also colloquially known as the bolter, is the standard issue rifle of the Adeptus Astartes. A 75 caliber weapon, the bolt gun works similarly to the modern day RPG, firing a relatively small explosive. An initial ballistic charge launches the round, after which the explosive, commonly called a bolt, is self-propelled. Once it penetrates its target, it explodes. Finally handcrafted in Space Marine or Adeptus Mechanicus forges, Astartes pattern bolt guns are heavy, sturdy weapons with an immense recoil that ordinary humans would find almost impossible to control, much less operate without breaking their arms. For all intents and purposes, the bolter operates much like the Gyrojet series of weapons manufactured in the 60s, but on a much larger scale. Firing 19x76mm rounds, a user named Brownie338 on Reddit actually went through the trouble of calculating the destructive capacity of a bolter round, which thank God for that person, as it saved me a ton of time with this video. In their post, they estimate the masses and properties of the standard bolt round, considering the elements like solid rocket propellant fuel, outer casing, gyro stabilizer, explosive charge, depleted uranium core, and diamantine tip. Through these estimations, it calculates the total weight of a bolter round to be about 100 grams. They then extrapolate the projectile's ballistic characteristics, estimating its velocity to be around 707 meters per second, and its kinetic energy upon impact to be approximately 27,194 joules, which is comparable to approximately 2 simultaneous direct hits from a .50 BMG round. I've provided a link in the description for those who are curious about the specifics and would like to read in detail, but I've double checked the calculations and everything seems to be in order, so I'm willing to take this at face value for its initial impact force. What the post, however, does not account for is the fact that, as previously mentioned, A bolt round explodes after penetrating its target. In the post, Brownie338 mentioned that bolt round contains approximately 13 grams of explosive filling. If we were to use octanotrocubane, which is one of the most effective explosives of the modern age, having an RE factor of 2.38, which means it detonates with 2.38 times the energy of TNT. So if we multiply 13 grams by 2.38, we obtain an equivalent weight of 30.94 grams. If we then multiply this by the energy released per gram of TNT, 4,184 joules, we can determine the total energy of a bolt round's explosion. Thus, the total force exerted on a target yields 129,453 joules of energy. Considering the explosion occurs inside the target, a single bolt round impacts and explodes with a total energy of 156,647 joules. This surpasses the power of 8 direct hits from a 50 BMG or over 84 direct hits from a 5.56 NATO on a single point. This underscores the immense power wielded by a bolter. Given that the modern Anzio 20mm rifle exerts roughly 60,000 joules of force on a target with a round roughly the same size, I'll let you draw your own conclusions. This is all without mentioning that the bolter is capable of firing fully automatic, with the game's Space Marine showing it to be capable of roughly 5 rounds per second. It's evidently capable of disgusting amounts of damage per magazine. Additionally, we have standard flamers, which are likely akin to napalm flamethrowers such as the M2 used during the Second World War, which the flames of range between 800 to 1200 Celsius in temperature. It's worth noting that Artemis' combi flamer, Hellfire Extremis, is a unique one that makes use of a Xenos-derived, highly flammable bioalchemical poison, which is inimical to all forms of life as it unleashes its gouts of flame. Then we have power weapons, which almost without fail all Deathwatch sergeants and above are equipped with some variation of, be it a power sword, power axe, or thunderhammer. Power weapons generally exude a hazy field of bluish energy that wraps around the primary impact region of a melee weapon, be it a sword's blade or a Warhammer's head, which is capable of disrupting the molecular bonds of matter when it strikes. Due to this fact, this means that for all intents and purposes, Astartes wielding such blades are capable of completely ignoring the durability of anything they strike. By some unknown method, Artemis is also known to carry stasis bombs, which do exactly what they say on the tin. However, considering they're usually only believed to be used by the Dark Angels chapter, it's quite curious how he manages to get his hands on them, although inquisitorial fuckery is probably to blame here. Now I know some of you are going to ask about iron halos because Artemis has one, but honestly in this battle, I don't see it making much of an impact. It's kind of irrelevant, as they mostly protect against ranged attacks, and the only one that Artemis is likely to encounter in this hypothetical is the Rage Blast of Meruem, which is entirely out of the Iron Halo's weight class, as demonstrated in Sokol's portion of the video. Although it would likely prevent him from being puppeteered by Neferpito's Terpishkora, were he to be killed without his armour having its power source removed. These humans are definitely foolish creatures. Think as hard as those weak brain cells of yours can manage. And tell me, do you humans ever listen to the cries of mercy coming from the pigs and cows that you slaughter? I didn't think so. I would rather see humanity fall to chaos rather than trust the words of a Xenos. So now that we've scaled all the belligerents, let's go over locale and how I believe the battle would play out, or rather the Astartes' plan of attack. This is one of those lovely hypotheticals wherein every character present is able to act perfectly within the bounds of their own character without twisting some critical aspect of how they'd operate just to make the video work. As for location, let's just assume that Hunter x Hunter's planet is just another world within the 40k universe, for simplicity's sake. How I think the battle plays out is with the Astartes being called to the world, having received word of a new Xenos species, which means alien for the uninitiated, on a world populated by humans. As for time, this battle would be taking place exactly as the extermination mission led by Netero canonically did, although their numbers would not have been thinned by Gon, Killua and Kite as they were in the anime/manga. Given that Meruem and his forces are entrenched within the Royal Palace, it's more than likely that Deathwatch forces would deploy via... please forgive me, 40k fandom, for making this joke unironically in 2024, but...
Deep strike! Yes! Steel rain! Yeah!
Given that Artemis is originally of the Mortificators chapter, whose gene size are the Ultramarines and the Primarch being Rabute Gilliman, he's far more likely to utilise the Tactica of the Codex Astartes. The squads would then likely drop in these respective locations. Due to their near instantaneous arrival through the use of drop pods and their lack of NEM, Meruem would likely initially be unfazed by the assault and would send the hordes of peon-level ants and their squadron leaders into an utter massacre, given that in both the anime and manga, standard ants are shown to be taken down by between 3 to 5 5.56mm rounds. They would be absolutely decimated by 25 fully equipped Deathwatch Astartes. 2, maybe 3 of the squads would secure positions and entrances to prevent reinforcements, while the remaining squads would almost certainly breach and clear the lower floors, setting up further perimeters, which would almost definitely draw the attention of Pito, Puff and Yuppie, which is where the real battle begins. Personally, I believe that because of Shia Puff's Beelzebub Hatsu, he alone would become a serious problem for the Astartes on the interior. Pito would also more than likely use their speed advantage over the Astartes on the outside of the palace to give them a serious run for their money. I think Pito is too fast to get caught by Walter, and given the distance it was able to cover to sever Kite's arm, but the strength and raw durability, sorry Noodles, I love you, of the Astartes would almost bring the exterior battle to a stalemate. Meanwhile, during the chaos of Puff's Beelzebub, Artemis would make use of Hellfire Extremis and its large area of effect to clear a path through the copies and head towards Meruem's position. If Yuppie were to be in the way, being the weakest of the Royal Guard in my opinion in this scenario, Artemis would likely be able to make short work of him with his power sword, as due to proximity to Meruem he wouldn't risk a Rage Blast, and Artemis is able to completely ignore his durability, which would at least temporarily take him out of the fight. Much like in the main continuity, Meruem would not want to fight Artemis near Komugi and risk endangering her, and so would leave the palace, forcing Artemis to give chase. As Sokol and I established, Meruem is significantly faster. As a result, during this time, Meruem's hyper-analytical brain would recognise quite clearly that Artemis does not have the movement speed to keep up with him. Once far enough clear, Meruem would likely try and talk Artemis down, much the same as he did with Isaac Netero. However, as demonstrated in the lore for the Death Mask box set, Artemis really does not like non-humans. So, also much like Netero, he'd be impossible to sway to Meruem's viewpoint, and thus the battle would begin. Meruem is roughly 4 times faster than Artemis as established, however the Astartes captain has his light speed reaction times, so from here, it really becomes a matter of who lands what first. Bear in mind, because of this speed differential, it would mean that Artemis has precisely 0 chance of hitting the Chimera Ant King with his stasis grenade, at least not without getting caught in the blast himself. Personally, I think that due to Meruem only having been alive for 40-something days, it'd be preposterous to assume that it ever witnessed a complete durability negation. In his fight with Netero, he demonstrated a willingness to take hits in order to figure out the holes in an opponent's defences. After taking some fire from the Chem Flamer and perhaps a few power sword strikes or two, even after inflicting injuries on Artemis, I think it would cost him dearly. However, with his much faster travel speed, he'd begin to retreat to the palace, in order for Neferpitou to heal him. At this point, because of the toxic nature of Hellfire Extremis, we'd likely see Meruem absorb any of the remaining Royal Guard, much like it did after the poor man's Rose, resulting in a pseudo post-Rose Meruem, which at that point, because of his Photon N, Artemis and Astartes simply don't have a chance. At best, they can pull for a draw by Artemis taking both himself and Meruem into a stasis field, which I find to be extremely unlikely. So in my opinion, Meruem takes this one pretty handily, but only if he's able to obtain his post-Rose state. If the Astartes are able to kill off Pito, Puff and Yuppie before Meruem returns, it really could go in either direction, with extreme difficulty on either side's part. But all of this, of course, is just my opinion, and I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on this. Let me know in the comments down below whether you think the battle would play out differently, or maybe you think Pito and the Royal Guard wipe the remaining kill teams. I'd love to hear your thoughts. However, for now, I've been 6 Past Kaikan, alongside Sokol, whom again I must urge you to go and subscribe to. It absolutely deserves it, and I will see you in the next one. Peace!